Hey all, how are you all doing this morning? Can you all hear me, first of all? Yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, so how are all y'all doing this morning? Hopefully good. Okay, mostly fine. Yeah, okay, so we have a fair bit to cover, so we'll try to get into it as quickly as possible. Yeah, so essentially I'm gonna try to get through just kind of the big picture idea, like what is this class about? What are we going to do? What are the next few weeks going to look like? Um, and then kind of dig down into kind of like the meat and bones of the first things, the first assignments, and the first things you can be working on. So with that in mind, let's see if I can share. Uh, Hopefully it doesn't crash because the last times I've been having issues with the Zoom crashing when I share my screen, which is not ideal.
A few moments later.
All right. So that's clearly not working. So let's do something else instead. So what I'm going to do is clearly the slides aren't working and I can't make that happen. So I'm going to make a video right after we're done here with the actual slides and all the details in there. And we'll just kind of wing it and just talk about what we need to talk about without slides kind of from there. Does that more or less work for everyone?
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, the slides will be posted on D2L. All this is being recorded. I'm going to post a video as soon as we're done, and I'm going to make a second video with the actual slides of all the extra stuff that we're not getting with the slides right now. So hopefully that all makes sense. And yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I had this sorted and it was working, but apparently it's not. So all right. So yeah, so like I said, we're going to talk about just big picture, what this class is going to, how this class is going to work. We're going to talk about the different project types that we're going to be, that are possible, and kind of what is a project and all that. And then we're going to talk about sort of like what the next, the first like few weeks are going to kind of look like. Okay, so yeah, so let's see here. So yeah, so a few things about me. So my name is Dan Charbonneau. You can just call me Dan. That's totally fine. My email is in the slides. You should all be on the class Slack. If you aren't already, you should do that right now. Most of the communication and most of the kind of like, yeah, just how we're going to stay in touch for this class is going to be through Slack. So just make sure that you join that. The link should be on D2L, I'm pretty sure. So yeah. By far, direct messaging me on Slack is the fastest way to get in touch with me. If you have questions that are relevant to everyone, just post those on Slack, obviously, so on and so forth. Let's see. Oh yeah, so generally I try to respond pretty quickly to messages and everything. If you read to me about something and you haven't heard back within like 24 or 48 hours, you can email me, PM me again. If I haven't gone back to you within like 2 days, it's because it's just completely gone out of my mind. So so just remind me, and that's super helpful. Yeah, same thing. If you want to meet with me or whatever, just message me and we'll find a time to meet. That's totally fine. Okay, so yeah, so my background, I'm coming from kind of a biology. My background is like my research and my kind of focus is animal behavior, studying behavior of ants, specifically ants and like social insects in general. And my career has like zigged and zagged a fair bit, kind of all over the place. But essentially, a big part of kind of what I've been doing, or what I kind of do, is apply kind of data science techniques to behavior research. So that's kind of how I ended up here. Yeah. So among other things, so kind of my strengths, I guess, would be kind of a lot of the just kind of the data engineering, data mining kind of side of things, statistical analyses, that sort of thing. I have a fair bit of stuff also that uses that works on spatial tracking of like recording ants and stuff, and the kind of spatially tracking where they go. And I have also some stuff that uses computer vision and machine learning to kind of detect ants on videos and detect different behaviors. And the only reason I mentioned that is because in case anyone is interested in those types of topics, I would potentially consider mentoring a group. For the most part, I generally don't, but if someone's super excited about doing computer vision stuff, then we can definitely talk about that. Okay. Okay, yeah. So the way this is going to work is the first few weeks of essentially the first 5 weeks. And if you look, I think I posted on Slack, I hope. Yeah, I posted the calendar on Slack. So have a look at that. The calendar might change some, but basically that should be the more or less the structure kind of for what the semester looks like. If you look at it, essentially the first 4 weeks is a lot of just kind of meeting in class, and sort of what I'm calling a sort of project development boot camp, where you guys can be essentially writing a sort of a rough version or kind of a practice version of a project proposal, and then basically one every week with randomly assigned groups. And so the reason for that is there's a few different reasons. One is, so probably a lot of you know each other already, but you may not know a lot of the other students in the class. And ideally what I want is to have everyone at least have the experience of working with a bunch of people that they don't know, that they're not used to working with. So that's why I'm forcing you guys to work in random groups. Your actual groups where you're working on your full project, you will choose your groups. Don't worry about that. But just at the start, I'm just forcing you guys to kind of interact with a bunch of different people that you may not normally interact with. So yeah. Yes, someone raised a hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the schedule and I'm seeing that there's a meeting on Monday next week.
Yeah.
But isn't that MLK Day? So I'm just wondering if that's a
Oh, shoot. Yeah. Sorry about that. I did not think about that. So we won't be having a meeting that day, and I'll switch that lecture to some other day. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry, when I put the schedule together, I wasn't looking at holidays, so good call. So no lecture next Monday, and the proposal will still be due for next Monday, the thing that's due, but the lecture, the project skills and market review, that'll be pushed probably to the Monday after, or I'm not sure. We'll push it back to some other time. Yeah, and actually I'll update the schedule and post that on Slack. Yeah, okay. So if you look at that schedule, essentially with those extra changes that I'm going to have to make now, essentially the idea is for the first 3 weeks, you're basically going to write a project proposal, submit that, then everyone is going to review other students' proposals, and then we're going to meet together in class and essentially do a sort of peer review of of those proposals. So yeah, and basically that's going to be the cycle for the first 3 weeks, where basically every week there's going to be a new project proposal with a new random group and a new different project idea that you're going to kind of put together, submit that, and then everyone's going to look through. I'll probably assign someone's or some groups proposals to individuals, and then your job is you're going to have to like write up just a short, doesn't have to be like complicated or anything, but a sort of a short review of like kind of what works, what doesn't work, just kind of like giving feedback for the project. You're going to upload that to D2L, and then we're going to meet in class to kind of talk about it in person. Does that sort of make sense? Yeah, all the lectures will be recorded and posted. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so throughout all of that process of doing those sort of proposals and peer review kind of cycles, we're going to go through and kind of like we're going to have some lectures where we're kind of learning some stuff, doing some kind of project development stuff, and kind of peppering in a few of those extra things. The proposals themselves, the first one that's going to be due for Monday is going to be relatively short. It'll basically be sort of a description and a few other things, but it'll be pretty short. Second one will be a little bit bigger. Third one will be even bigger. So we're going to kind of increase in complexity and size as we go. And then we're going to talk about like those extra things that you can be doing as we kind of go along. Okay. What else? Right. All right. So points and assignments for this class. So there's essentially 160 points total for everything in this class. The actual capstone project, so your actual project that you're going to do and complete and submit at the end of the semester, is worth 80 points, so half of that. And then a lot of the kind of lead up assignments, like those proposals and the peer review, and there's going to be a bunch of like small assignments. All of that is going to be worth 65 points. And then at the very end, once you've already submitted your project and all that, you're also going to have to present a poster at the ISTA showcase. And there's a tentative date for that now, which I forget what it is, but towards the end of the semester. And that's going to be on a Wednesday between noon and 2. So just kind of plan ahead for being available during that time slot. And you're basically just going to present your poster at this sort of like a mini school showcase kind of thing. Right. If you do not pass the capstone, so if your project, so like I said, the project itself is worth 80 points, everything else is another 80 points, right? So the capstone itself is worth half the class. However, if your capstone project does not pass, you do not pass this class. The opposite is also true. If you don't do any of the other assignments and you have a really amazing capstone, you still fail this class. So you need to pass both sections, both the project and all the other stuff, and yeah. The ice showcase is in person. So I know that some of you are out of state and there's exceptions to all that. So that's fine. We can work that out. But for the most part, I expect you guys to be there to present. If you really can't, and if there's really good reasons for you that you can't, then that's obviously fine. And we can figure that out when we get there. Okay. Right. So I think maybe historically, yeah, okay. So someone's asking, is it likely someone who's engaging in all the classwork and feedback would fail their capstone project? Maybe. So I will say that, so I think sometimes students come into this class with an expectation that like basically you're going to pass regardless. That is not true. You need to actually put in the time and put in the work to actually pass. What I will say is if you basically just kind of like stay on top of stuff and just kind of do your work, you'll be fine. If you're contributing a reasonable amount to your group and things are working well, you'll be fine. Yeah, the bar isn't that high to pass this class, but you do need to kind of be there. What I will say also is that students who fail this class, usually it's a few things. One, it's students that basically don't do anything at all on their group project, where their group mates are like, where's this person? I can't find them. They haven't done anything on this group project. That usually is one case. Another case is when your group dynamics aren't working well and the group implodes and things go really, really badly. That's usually the other thing that gets students. And I will say that generally I would say that, so this class seeks to both help you develop but also assess a few different things. One is obviously your technical skills, like that's a big part of it. The capstone project, you're supposed to be demonstrating like the things that you've actually learned over the course of your degrees. So that's a big part of it. But sort of the other big parts of it is actually being able to work in a group effectively, which I think are skills that you probably aren't actually actively taught in your degrees, but are there skills that are going to be extremely useful when you actually get a job, right? And sort of along with that, sort of like communication skills and all those sort of soft skills that you probably aren't actually taught, but are actually super important. That is often what gets students in this class. So what I would say is, put a lot of extra effort in making sure that your group is running smoothly and things are working really well. It's a sink or swim type situation where essentially if your group is, or I mean, so there's exceptions to all this, but generally, if you all sort of like are working individually within your group, and then at the end you're like, oh well, this person didn't do anything, and so we didn't actually complete our project, that's a fail for everyone. So you sink together and you swim together. You are responsible for your group mates getting their work done. You're responsible for all of that stuff. So just be sure, if there's an issue, if you're noticing that someone's maybe not contributing as much as they should, bring it up immediately, in a constructive and useful manner. No, there's no in-person work. I mean, there's essentially no in-person work until the ice showcase. Really, everything else could probably be done virtually. All right, so yeah, so like I was saying, yeah, so it's a sink or swim together kind of thing. If there's an issue in your group, resolve it. If people are not feeling happy, if you're getting a sense that the group is not working correctly, call a group meeting and sort it out. Deal with these things at the head. Don't wait for things to fester and get worse. That's not going to be good for anyone. What I would also say is communication. So my impression is that a lot of you are not used to communicating effectively and a lot, but that's going to be important. You need to stay in touch with all of your group mates. At least if you're not talking to your group mates at least once a week, there's a problem. If you're not talking to your mentor at least once a week, that's a problem. I'm going to ask you to, we'll get into that in a second, but we're going to ask each group to contact me once a week just to give me a status update of where things are. And you should know where each of your group mates is at, what they've done, what they haven't done, all of that. You're going to update me once a week. So yeah, so again, communication and group work are going to be the two things that I think are probably going to be the most challenging, and that will probably end in students failing this class more than anything else. The technical skills, usually you guys have them. That's usually not the issue. The issue is just kind of getting the work done, getting your project done, and working together as a group. So just kind of fair warning. Right. Okay. The other thing too is, like I said, so, and I posted something about this, attending lectures is mandatory. So you guys have to come to these. You can't just watch the videos after the fact. I'm going to use the Zoom login data to kind of match who was here and who wasn't here. So yeah, and essentially if you miss more than one lecture without a valid reason, that you get in touch with me before the class. If you miss more than one without a valid reason, that's an automatic administrative drop. So yeah, so if you're going to not be here and you have a good reason, let me know ahead of time. If you obviously can't, like if you're in a car accident or something, then obviously let me know after. But essentially you need to attend the lectures. Yeah, and especially for the peer review ones, you need to participate. You need to you can't just kind of show up and turn Zoom on and then go off and do something else. That won't fly. You need to participate. You need to kind of be involved in that sort of like class discussion of, talking about other people's work and other people's projects. All right, the other thing too is if your group is more than 2 weeks behind schedule, that is potentially also an administrative job. If you're more than 2 weeks behind of where you should be, odds are you won't actually be able to catch up, and you're better off kind of dropping the class anyway rather than trying to catch up and putting all this work into this project that you won't be able to complete. Yeah. And same thing, like I said, I'm going to ask you guys, your group's project manager will submit to me a weekly status update, and we'll talk about the project manager thing in a second. If you skip more than one of those without a good reason ahead of time, that's also potentially an administrative drop. So you need to stay on top of your communication. You need to stay on top of kind of knowing where things are at and making sure that your work is on schedule. Any questions about that? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
How many people will be in a group?
So groups can essentially be 2 to 5 ish. There's exceptions if you want to be 6. That's, we can talk about that, but essentially most groups tend to be around 4 people. If you have a group of 2 people, that can work. If you want to be more than 4 or more than 5, that's fine too. For the most part, people working on their own, I basically don't allow individual projects unless there's an extremely good reason, and like it has to be extremely good. For the most part, like I said, part of what we're assessing is your ability to work in groups, and if you're working by yourself, then that's not super fair compared to everyone else that's having to like deal with a group and all of that also. Okay. Other questions? You can throw them on the chat or just kind of speak up if you want.
Quick question. For this for the Capcom project, was it does it say anywhere in the syllabus like specifically what it's gonna be, or could it be like anything that has to be like actively involving with our group?
I'm not sure what you mean.
So like basically what is the final project basically in a sense, if
Yeah,
there's
okay. So yeah, all right. So let's get into that. So so when I actually record the video with the slides, this will probably make a little bit more sense. But essentially, generally, kind of talk about like what the project is or what it can be. Usually most projects fall into one of three different categories, either sort of research and statistics, where you're doing kind of a research project and you're doing kind of stats and kind of sort of a data intensive kind of project. Another one is if another kind of like category is either apps or software or an algorithm, where you're essentially creating an app or something like that. And then the third category is you're making a game or a VR type thing. So those are the three broad categories. There's also, in some, again, extremely rare cases, there can be a collaboration with the engineering capstones. Generally, I would discourage you from doing that for a few reasons. One, logistically, it's complicated because their capstones are over 2 semesters, yours is over 1. And historically, that's been an issue where the engineering students aren't necessarily motivated to finish like some standalone completed package in 1 semester, and so the ISTA students end up kind of stuck in the situation where they don't have a final project. So generally, like if you have a engineering project in mind and someone that you want to work with and it's super clear, and we can talk about it, but for the most part, I would discourage you from doing that. Okay, right. So scale and scope. So like I said, groups are going to be 2 to 5 people generally. How much work is expected from you? Sort of what the bar of what I'm expecting, or what the minimum amount of work that is required for you to pass the capstone is 55 hours of skilled labor. Aside from the proposal and the presentation. So 55 hours of skilled labor on the actual project. Skilled labor does not mean writing like I'm not sure, like writing like text that isn't technical or stuff like that. That's not skilled labor. That's just kind of stuff that needs to happen, right? So yeah, so each individual in the group needs to do 55 hours of skilled labor. If your group has 4 people in it, then 4 times 55 hours is what the scope of the project needs to be. If you have 2 people in a group, 2 times 55 hours, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so just to answer Ben's question, so we will have random groups at the beginning, and then essentially when we get to the point where we're forming groups, basically you guys will sort of self-assemble into groups. Yeah, that should be sort of the big picture. So yeah, so like I said, the 3 big groups that I talked about, the data, the app, or the game, those are the kind of the big categories. You of course you can think outside the box and do something that's outside of that. You could do an archiving or creative writing capstone. That's fine. That wouldn't fall into those 3 categories. That's obviously fine too. As long as, once again, 55 hours of skilled labor and you're actually demonstrating the skills that you've learned over the course of your degree, that's fine. Yeah, so actually one thing that's worth mentioning is, so I am not going to be grading your capstones. Your mentor is grading your capstone. The reason for that is really good. My background is data statistics and data engineering. I would not know how to grade a game capstone. Like I just wouldn't, right? I don't have the knowledge. I don't have it doesn't make any sense. Your mentor will have those skills. They will be the ones that can actually assess how your project is, whether you actually did the work, whether everything is working the way it should. And so your mentor is the one who grades your capstone. Yeah, I'm going to be grading all the other stuff, all the other other non-capstone stuff. Okay, yeah, actually, so that's one thing. So I would say right now, do not start forming your final groups now. That's not going to be helpful. Do not contact your mentors yet. You can start looking around and think about different mentors that you might want to work with. That's fine. Do not contact them until one, you've cleared it with me, and two, I've had a chance to actually contact them and let them know what the expectations are as a mentor, right? So before you contact them, I just want to get in touch with them and be like, here's what your responsibilities are, here's what you need to do. These students are probably going to contact you just so that they're prepared, they know what to expect before you contact them. I mean, a mentor, so mentors are going to be faculty members. So they're going to be, so they're not TAs, they're actually like faculty that have expertise in whatever your project is on, right? Yeah, let's see. Yeah, okay, so for the mentors, yes, you do need to find your own mentors. They don't have to be in the iSchool. For the most part, a lot of your projects, your mentors, they will be in the iSchool because their specialty will be closely related to whatever you're working on. But in some cases, it doesn't have to be, right? Last semester, I had a group of students who a big part of their project was doing a survey. Survey work is not trivial. You need to know what you're doing. I don't know how to do surveys, and for the most part, people in the iSchool, they don't really do that kind of work either. And so I had them contact an outside someone who actually specializes in writing surveys and analyzing the data from the surveys. So that's like one example. Right. So yeah, so the reason I'm forcing random groups at the beginning is to force you to meet people in the class in order to create groups. So hopefully that should help you guys kind of mix and get to know each other and actually work together, see how you work together before you actually form your final group. Right, so an example of a data-driven project. So yeah, so last semester I had a group that were interested in sort of looking at gentrification and using sort of data, like accessing a bunch of data that they could get from I think I forget what it was, but there's a bunch of different things. Like there's obviously income and kind of family size and gender and ethnicity, and there's like a bunch of data that they collected, but there's a bunch of kind of left field data that they also collected, which I'm totally blanking on now. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember, but they collected a whole bunch of data and they're trying to predict neighborhoods that were like on the verge of being gentrified, and that was sort of like and so they developed sort of an algorithm to do that. Yes, so there is somewhere you can see previous capstone projects. There should be links in the slides when I post them, so you can take a look at that. And there's a bunch of videos from COVID times. Instead of doing live posters, students did videos, and so there's a bunch of videos of students presenting their posters also. So it should be one mentor per group. Yeah, so one faculty mentor per group, and so actually we'll stick a pin in that for a second. Let me just finish something real quick. Yeah, okay. So generally, sort of the organization is going to be this sort of like the idea, and if I had slides, you would see a nice picture that actually demonstrates this, but essentially you're going to have your group. Within your group, there's going to be one person that's going to be the project manager, who is sort of the point person who should be doing the communication. So they're the ones who are going to email me their weekly reports. They're the ones who are responsible for sort of managing time, making sure everyone's like working well, making sure that, so they have extra responsibilities for making sure that things are running smoothly. They're going to be in charge of the communication, both within the group and outside of the group. They should be sort of taking on a leadership role, an organization role. Yeah. So essentially, if you're in your group and you're like, this is not working, something's not working right, you should contact your project manager and be like, look, I have these concerns. Could you do something about it? And then they should take the responsibility to be like, all right, let's figure out some way to solve it. So that's your group. Outside of your group, you'll have your mentors, and they're essentially the knowledge, right? They're the people who know stuff. They're not there to do your project for you. They're not there to tell you exactly how to do your project. They're there to, you should ideally meet with them once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, but probably like once a week. And just kind of like check in, here's where we're at, here are the problems we're having, and they should be able to help you with like the technical stuff of like, oh, we'll have you like looked at this thing, or here's one potential solution to the problem you're having, that kind of stuff. They're the knowledge repository. They're the people who know stuff. All right. Me, I'm sort of the yeah, I'm not sure, but essentially like I said, groups are expected to sort things out amongst themselves. Obviously, there's a point where you've made a good effort to actually get things, if there's a problem and things are kind of like you're not able to solve it, or there's a kind of a bigger issue, then that's where I step in and I figure out what's going on and step in, right? So yeah, so that's sort of my role, is to kind of make sure that you guys are sort of just to make sure that things are running smoothly. And if there's a big issue that you're not able to resolve, then that's where I step in. That's sort of my role there. Yeah, does that sort of make sense? All right. What are we doing on time? Okay. Okay, yeah. So in the slides, there's actually a couple of examples. Oh, actually, let me back up a second. So right, so like I was saying, scope and scale, 55 hours of skilled labor per person. The final product, so in your proposals and your final versions of your proposals, one of the things you're expected to do is tell me what your final deliverable is. So what are you going to produce at the end of this? Generally, we have you do sort of a minimum, like at a minimum, we're going to have this, and sort of like a stretch goal of like, if things are going really well, we're going to do all these extra cool things. Those two kind of deliverables should be there in your final proposal. That is the bar that we meaning your mentor will grade your project on. If you say we're going to do this and you don't meet that goal, you fail. All right. So I mean, with a few exceptions, but for the most part, essentially, like, your deliverable is what you're expected to produce. You need to produce that. What was I going to say? Right. So so it's worth thinking very clearly now in the planning stages what that deliverable will be, making sure that it's a reasonable amount of work, that you actually can attain it. Don't set a minimum deliverable that's really like extremely difficult. That's setting yourself up for failure. Yeah. Yeah. Generally, the way that capstones are graded is if you just barely meet the minimum deliverable, that's 60% on your capstone grade, like the capstone project grade. If you meet some of the extended goals, then that's somewhere around 80%. If you meet all of your extended goals, that's like 100%. And obviously there's some wiggle room in there. It's all pretty fluid. If your group ran into a bunch of technical problems that were not expected and it made sense that you wouldn't expect them, like I had a group that was doing a project that they were trying to collect a bunch of real estate data, and I think it was they were scraping Zillow, and Zillow caught on to the fact that they were scraping their data and like shut it down, and so they basically didn't have data. So that kind of thing, like that was unforeseeable at the moment, and so obviously we'll take that into consideration. But for the most part, your minimum deliverable is what you're expected to do, and that's what you're being graded on. So what percent of people fail the project? So I think last semester, I think out of 60-ish students, I think there's about 5 or 6 students that failed. So somewhere around 10%. I think 10 to 20% is kind of what is expected. You know, one student basically didn't show up to any of the lectures and they were dropped. There's one group that imploded. Anyway, yeah. So essentially they had issues, and they basically just didn't say anything, didn't tell me, didn't just kind of like pretend everything was going well up until like the very end. They're like, actually nothing's working, and then the group completely imploded. And then I think there's another student that they essentially didn't contribute anything at all to his group's project. So that's, again, like I was saying, like for the most part, that's going to be where your problems are going to be, is just kind of the group dynamics and just making sure that you're on top of your work. So just make sure that your group is working well. Make sure that you're doing the work that you're supposed to be doing, and you'll be fine for the most part. Okay. Right, so your final project, so your actual deliverable can be not anything, but it can be really, really flexible. Each group is going to be different. If you're doing a sort of research statistics project, you'll probably like write a paper. If you're doing a game, then the game is the final product. It could be just kind of a bunch of smart code available on GitHub. It could be a website, it could be an app, it could be whatever. You tell us what your final deliverable will be. We'll obviously tell you if it works or not. But essentially it could be a bunch of different things. The other thing that's going to be important beyond the scope and scale of the project, of how much time you spend on it, there's a novelty component that's going to be important. So your project has to do something new. You cannot do something that's like already been done a bajillion times. That's not interesting. You can't make yet another game like you know, that's been done a million times. You need to do something that's a little bit novel, a little bit different, that's a little bit more interesting than what's already been done. And we'll talk about how to kind of get there. So part of what we're going to be doing, I think, for the second round of practice proposals is you'll do either sort of a literature review or market research to kind of get a sense of like what's out there, what do we already know, just to kind of get a sense of like, is what we're thinking about, does it already exist, or is what we're doing something completely new, and how is our new thing interesting and good for what builds on what already exists, right? Okay. Yeah, so in the slides when I do the video, there's examples of a research project, an app, and a game, and then there's sort of an example of sort of a a research project. Like for example, the research project is predicting UFC outcomes using logistic regression. So essentially, the project there is we use logistic regressions to predict UFC fight outcomes using data from Kaggle. Our presentation is determining who's going to win each fight in 2022. That has been done a billion times. That is not novel. That is not interesting. And I will also say that faculty mentors, like statistic projects on sports, have been done and done to death. A lot of faculty mentors will not want to do like mentor a project that does that. So for the most part, I would say avoid that unless you have a really cool spin on it that's like really interesting and different. So that would not meet the novelty requirement, and would also probably annoy a fair bit of the faculty mentors. And actually, I think in Win 16 you do a project that's kind of like that. So, and we're not doing kind of a short project like that. For example, what you could do is you could ask, are neural networks any better at predicting UFC fight outcomes? In that case, you're putting in sort of neural networks as a new way of looking at or new way of analyzing this data. And in that case, for example, your presentation, instead of just being like a paper or something, you could be like a website that you're building in R Shiny where people can input variables and kind of like use the algorithm predict stuff, right? So at least that would be novel. You're kind of doing a novel spin using your neural networks instead of just kind of logistic regressions. You're building a website. You're using RShiny to allow people to kind of interact with your algorithm, that kind of thing. That would be kind of a reasonable amount of novelty for that kind of project. Like I said, there's examples for all types of projects in the slides, so you can take a look at that. A board game as a final project would be fine. That'd be fine. I mean, again, you need to demonstrate the skills. So if most of your time is spent just kind of like designing a board game and making it pretty or like building it, that's not really the skill set that you're supposed to be demonstrating. If your board game has allows you to demonstrate a lot of the skills that you have developed over the course of your degree, that'd be fine. It would also have to be novel enough. If you're just building Monopoly 2, then that's not going to fly. It has to be something novel and interesting, right? The novelty thing is tricky, I know, and it's super vague and amorphous. But so that's probably also like when you're actually writing your full proposal, there'll be multiple versions. There'll be a first draft where I give you feedback, the second draft, your mentor will give you feedback. And so as you're going through that process, it'll be like, well, this isn't novel enough, or like this is not going to be complicated enough, or this is too hard, maybe pull it back. That's what me and your mentor are there for, to kind of help guide you along and help kind of funnel your project to something that is novel and has sufficient scope and scale and complexity. Sorry about that. Headphones died. Okay. Let's see, what else? Yeah, okay. So we don't have a ton of time left, so I'm just going to talk about what you guys need to work on. So there's a few things that a few assignments that you have do. Okay, so one, on D2L, there is a pre-class quiz, so just make sure that you get that done by Friday. It's pretty straightforward. It's mostly a way for me to kind of get a sense of kind of what the class is like, in terms of like what skills you guys have, what skills you're bringing in, that sort of thing. Yeah, it should be a pretty quick thing. And the other thing too is it's also useful for you guys to kind of like spend just a little bit of time thinking about what skills you have, what skills you're bringing to a group, what skills you want to work on, what skills, because the capstones should be, you should be capitalizing on the skills you have and also stretching yourself a little bit. You shouldn't just be doing stuff that's like super easy for you. That's not really the point. You should be making yourself just a little bit uncomfortable, stretching yourself a little bit outside of what your skill set is. That's kind of where the sweet spot. You don't want to go too far and like be, like I've never used Unity, I'm going to teach myself Unity. That's not going to go well. Don't do that. Yeah, so just kind of keep that in mind. So that's a pre-class quiz. That's due by Friday at midnight. Make sure that you join the Slack if you haven't already. I also shared a Google Doc with your Zoom IDs. Make sure that you just tell me what your Zoom ID is, because that's what I use to see who is actually here. So make sure that you get that done. And all those things should be on D2L and on Slack, I think. And then the other thing is the first practice proposal. So what actually needs to be on that practice proposal? A few different things. Essentially, let's see if I can find it. There should be 4 different parts, and it should be pretty short. Like it should be like a page or 2 tops. So in a Word doc, I want you to list the group members. So just tell me who's in your group. Tell me who the project manager is. So you can put a little PM next to whoever that is. I want a short 1 to 2 paragraph description of what your project will be. So just sort of like telling me what your project is, what the idea is, just a short, like 1 or 2 paragraphs of like what it is. I will say, avoid being vague, be specific. Tell me what you mean. Don't use 20 words when 2 will do. Use your space effectively. If I'm having to read like a whole paragraph to get the fact that you're just doing like one simple thing, that's not good. So be concise. Be concise and be specific. So yeah, so short 1 to 2 paragraph description of your project. Then the third section, and this is listed on one of the third from last slide from the slides. Third section is a list of the skills and data that the project would require. So, you know, if you're building a game and you're planning on building in Unity, then Unity is a skill that you'll need. If you're doing a research project, you'll need, for example, real estate data, then you're going to need that. So list of the skills and the data that your project would require. And the idea is to think ahead of time, like what your project will need to be able to be done successfully. And then next to each skill and or data, who's going to be assigned to that skill and or data. So if you have someone in your group that is really strong in Unity, then put them assigned to doing the Unity stuff. And you can obviously share and do other stuff, but it's just sort of like planning out to see, this is what we need, this is who we have, are there any gaps in knowledge or whatever that we can identify right away, right? And then in the fourth section, just a list of at least two potential mentors and why you would consider them as mentors for your group. So this will force you to kind of go out there and sort of look at the department website and sort of like start poking around and see what mentors specialize on what and what kinds of things. So when you actually go around to finding your final mentor, you already have a good sense of kind of who's out there and who's available. Does that make sense? Those 4 things in a Word doc, submitted on D2L by Monday. Cool. All right, so I'm just going to address a few of these questions real quick, and then Sydney, if I haven't addressed her question. Has a mentor ever declined students' requests for them to be the mentor? Yes. So that can happen if the mentor has already accepted a lot of groups and they're at capacity. I know Drew always takes on a bunch of students working on games, but I think he caps at like 4 groups. So if you're the 5th group, then he'll probably tell you like, sorry, but no. And then he'll probably redirect you to work with Leonard, or there's a few other people who you could work with. They might also decline if they feel like their skill set doesn't match your project. If they're like, well, I don't know enough about what you're working on to actually be an effective mentor, they might say no too. If you're asking, so professors in the department, part of their job is mentoring students, and so part of their time is allocated to that, and that's fine. Professors outside of the department, they, for the most part, they will agree, and most professors are really nice, and even you know, adjuncts who aren't paid for that. A lot of people will agree to be your mentors and will be happy to do it, but their time isn't being, they're not really paid to do that, so they're doing it, you know, kind of out of the generosity of their own hearts. But in some cases, some professors might be like, well, actually, I don't have the time, or like, I'd rather not. So there's a bunch of reasons why professors might not mentor or might decline to mentor students. Appearances do matter. Making it pretty is important, but it is obviously a secondary. I mean, it depends on what your project is. If your project is about making something pretty, it needs to be pretty. If you're making a research website, it doesn't need to be pretty. It needs to be like functional and look nice-ish, but it doesn't have to be like super pretty or anything. When is the proposal due? I'm not sure if you mean the first one or the final one, but the first practice one is due Monday at midnight. The other one, I'm not sure. Yes. So, and actually, so what I might do is make another. Sorry about that. Seriously, Zoom is seriously trying my patience right now. Okay. So I'll make another tab for just kind of for kind of, yeah, all right. I'll make another tab in Slack just for kind of like sort of like talking about being groups and kind of like yeah, just kind of like just kind of matching for groups kind of thing. So I'll make a separate tab just so you can, so we're not like spamming the general one with that. So yes, you will be in groups for this first one. I'm going to post on Slack as soon as we're done here. I'm going to post on Slack a Google Doc that has your name and which group you're in next to it. So that'll be your group for the first one. Like I said, there can be randomly assigned groups. Sorry about that. Yeah. All right, so I think we're gonna call it there before Zoom crashes once again. Any last questions before we go? Anything else that you guys want to ask? Cindy had her hand up, but maybe she was just asked the question about the tabs on Slack. If not, definitely feel free to speak up.
I'm a little bit confused on the groups.
How do you mean?
For that first proposal, can you repeat how that's going to work for next
Yes.
week, Monday?
Yeah, so I'm going to put a link on Slack that will go to Google Doc, and your name will be next to a group number